All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
I love Wednesdays. I love Wednesdays for so many reasons, and today is a special Wednesday. Yep. Welcome, Kim. Kim is in the mix. Yeah.
How are you?
Yeah. And Albert has made it at the deadline. Thank you, Albert.
Albert, thank you.
Yeah. Albert's got a tough gig, man. His real gig goes to like 4 a.m. or something. I don't know what I don't ask a lot of questions because I don't want to be subpoenaed at a court case. So I don't like get into his personal life as to what he actually does. But I just know he's asked to perform some late night maneuvers.
He's like a Superman, you know.
And so it makes sometimes answering the morning bell a little bit harder. But
Albert, thank you.
Anyway, it's great to have him. Rothman's here today on Wednesdays. The great John Rothman joins us with his perspectives on politics and world events. And in the second hour, just to address guests, the brilliant Josh Robert Thompson, the voice of Schwarzenegger, Morgan Freeman. He's on Family Guy. He joins us. Funny, magnificent dude. He'll be here in the 11 o'clock hour. Yeah, really, really cool. If you're watching on the East Coast, you must adjust those times for East Coast times. No spoilers, but I will tell you I've been watching Wimbledon most of the morning, started very early. How
I'm
dare
sorry.
you?
Was that me sleeping?
How
Maybe.
dare you? How dare you? I cannot even believe it.
What?
Oh, tennis. You're watching tennis. You're watching a little ball go back and forth.
Those are amazing athletes. And how dare you?
Riveting. Riveting, I say.
You know what, pal? You created havoc and chaos.
You did. You did. We're starting so well, and you've created havoc and chaos because I believe tennis is one of the great, exciting sports, demanding tremendous athleticism from its competitors. And I'll tell you something else about tennis. Gosh, Kim is really... I can't believe Kim is getting so out of line.
There's never been anything like this.
I think I've indulged her too much, Albert.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, she's
Let me feel a little too comfortable. Maybe put out the welcome mat a little too much.
I think I'm oh, Kim, thank you so much. You're so great. Oh, your news is so important. And she's kind of gotten a big head. And she's coming in, and now she's just crapping all over the things I love.
My goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know. Well, I just think that, I don't know, Kim. Anyway, tennis is magnificent. And the other thing that might interest you, although I now question your patriotism, frankly, an American making it all the way to the quarterfinals.
Wow. Which
And
American?
Chris Eubanks, I told you about him the other day, 6'7" from Atlanta, a remarkable, and he was never really able to achieve, the heights at which he's competing now, and he became a tennis commentator. So in the interviews during his Wimbledon run, he's this super insightful, analytical guy. Usually they ask you, what were you thinking? Or how did you feel about such and such? And he has these thoughtful, reflective answers that you just don't hear generally in sports interviews. Because he's coming from this broadcast thing. What?
He's a real smart guy.
Well, he's smart, and also he's just, I think he's, as an analyst, I guess is what I'm saying, he's used to providing analysis. And so when they ask him about his game and certain matches during his Wimbledon run, you hear him being a little more insightful and analytical than you might hear in the average. So, but no spoilers. But let me just say it was a really great match. I was watching it. And there's another great match going on now that I'm recording with Alcaraz on court one. But I know that nobody watches tennis. I mean, compared to the other sports, The people who watch tennis, though, are a demographic you want, Kim. That's why people who see tennis also see all those commercials for Rolex and for, Emirates Airways, because I guess people who watch tennis have a lot of dough. So,
speaking of sports, though, did you see what happened at that All-Star baseball game last night?
What happened?
It was an A's fan protest.
What happened?
Fans that want the fans to put money together and buy the team, or they want the management to sell the team so it can stay in Oakland. They went to Seattle to this All-Star game. They mounted this big protest there. And, at the of several innings, they could be heard chanting, sell the team, sell the team.
Wow. Yeah. That's extraordinary. I didn't know that. Albert, can you fill us in on the All-Star game last night at all? Are you with us, or?
I think the NL won for the first time since 2012. So, and the Giants had 2 representatives.
Yeah, how about that? That's strong. That A's thing, didn't know that.
I wasn't aware of the A's thing as well, but I did. I do see the story in Cron 4. So Cron 4, there's a sell the team chant breakout that happened at the All-Star game.
Wow, look at Kim on top of the All-Star game situation and the controversy, but pretty much not a big fan of tennis is what I'm learning.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I couldn't tell you the score of a sports game, but if something newsworthy happened there, I'm on it.
I see. All right. Well, that's fair. All right.
Are you chitting me?
What?
Are you chitting me?
I'm not. I would never chit anybody. You chit people. That's your thing. Yeah, that's you. That's not me. I don't chit. Now, in addition, first of all, smash the like button if you would, please. That's kind of the business we have to do. We're crowdfunded, and it's free though to be hitting the thumbs up. Costs you nothing, so appreciate that. By the way, just one more piece of housekeeping. Then I want to get to this homelessness thing and a big closure, pretty substantial closure. I think actually this does warrant
a major announcement from the Mark Thompson Show.
It is a major announcement. I want to thank listeners of KFI Radio in Southern California for yesterday pushing us over the 12,000 subscriber mark.
Oh, thank you, KFI people.
I really believe it was the KFI listeners. I was on KFI yesterday, and they kind of made a play. We were close. I think we're then 48 subscribers, but they put us cleanly over the 12,000, and I really appreciate it. And everybody who's joining, I know that people sometimes subscribe and they never watch or they never join our regular routine here. But those who are new, I'll just tell you, this is a weird thing maybe to see a radio show, YouTube show. This is sort of what the radio show was. So there's a quality of this. We've taken all the people from the radio and we've brought them here. Now, we've evolved the show and we'll continue to evolve it, but that's what you're seeing. But thank you so much, all of you who subscribe. We're crowdfunded, so we really exist because so many have been on board for months now and support us. I mean, they give us monthly contributions, and I'm so very grateful for that. So, but again, the 12,000 happened yesterday after KFI Radio. So that was really cool. Thank you, KFIers. Yeah.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Now, we have a problem with homelessness in California. By the way, it is insanely hot in parts of the West. I don't mean to change topics, but I was thinking about living on the street and living in the heat. Now, if you're living on the street in San Francisco, you actually chosen a good city from the heat standpoint. It's only going to be in the 70s today, believe it or not, in San Francisco. It's in the inland areas of California, away from that ocean breeze, that you will bake. And then, of course, across the West, you will bake. The temperatures are brutal. I'm sure you'll have it in your news, Kim, but I mean, I'm talking about 115, 117 degrees in the next few days. That is not only withering heat, it is unhealthy heat. I mean, it will kill things. And so even as we talk about changes to the environment, to the climate, and the planet, you should be aware that heat alone changes the habitat balance. It changes the ecology, if you want to think of it that way. Get to more on that story. Now back to the homelessness thing. We've spent $17.5 billion working on trying to combat homelessness. In 4 years, we spent $17.5 billion. From 2018 to 2022, the state's homeless population actually grew. So even as we're throwing all that money at it, the problem with homelessness is growing in California.
So what are we doing wrong? Like what's going on? Where's the money going?
Exactly. Where's the money going? And we talk about it on this show from time to time, the homelessness industrial complex. There is a quality to this that is just like the Pentagon or the military or the healthcare system, where waste becomes pretty routine. You just see, you can't spend that kind of money and not see better results. But people are saying, if you talk to the governor's office, homelessness is big business, says Randy. I mean, clearly that's true. But, I will say this just in general, and this I think is important to remember. Someone is stealing that dinero, Julie says. Yeah, clearly that's true. But just because it's big business doesn't mean there isn't incremental improvement in the problem. Now, I'm not saying that's happening in homelessness, but I have this conversation around pharmaceutical companies. I mean, we all hate pharmaceutical companies and big pharma and all the rest. Sorry, I get these morning allergies. It's just awful.
I hear that.
And we talk about the problem of the pharmaceutical companies, and I always say, well, agreed. I mean, I can stipulate to the fact that pharmaceutical companies are big pharma is bad. But that doesn't mean that everything big pharma does is bad. I mean, you can be bad and still do good. I mean, I have Advil coursing through my body, and that's just a really low-hanging fruit example of the fact that it makes me feel so much better. My days as an athlete, of course, leave me a little hurting at times. So my point is simply painting the entire thing as crooked, I think really doesn't do the kind of examination of the problem that you need to do. So let's just move on here. With $17.5 billion, they are saying, again, in the governor's office, that without the interventions that have been provided by a lot of this funding, it would actually be worse, the homelessness situation, than it is. More than 170,000 unhoused people now live here in California. But with $17.5 billion, the state could theoretically have just paid the rent for every unhoused person in California for those 4 years. I mean, even at the high cost of rent.
That just doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't. It doesn't.
I mean, it's not reasonable. It's not a reasonable expenditure. What we're doing wrong. As a matter of fact, I was reading an article a few weeks ago. I think we talked about it on the show about the state of Texas. And Lord knows, I hate to give props to Texas, but what they're doing is so effective that cities like Santa Cruz and other cities in California, city leaders are going to Texas to see what it is that they're doing that's working for the homeless problem in Texas.
And what is it that they're doing that's working?
Their focus is long-term housing. So they're not focused on emergency housing. They're not focused on, I don't know, a multitude of other things, setting up tent cities, security, buying hotels for temporary housing. They're not doing that. They're focused on long-term housing, getting people in and getting people in for the long term. So it's not like you find a job, you're out on your own. It's we're going to set up this house, this, apartment center, and once you're in type of thing is what I'm reading that the gist of it is. And that seems to be working. They're spending less, and their effect on the homeless is much better than ours. They're actually making an impact. So,
wow.
Well done, Texas.
Yeah.
Y'all can all go to hell, and I'm going back to Texas.
A total of $20.6 billion has been allocated through 2024 to combat homelessness. Again, $20.6 billion. Nearly $4 billion went to local governments to spend on anti-homelessness initiatives. $3.7 billion went to a program called Project Home Key, which also funds local governments, but specifically to buy properties like motels, commercial buildings, to turn those places into permanent affordable housing. So far, 13,500 units have been finished. I mean, that's a lot, but it's not enough. And that's kind of on brand for what Kim was talking about, which is this is permanent housing.
Yeah.
$2 billion from the huge amount that I just mentioned to you went toward tax credits for developers to build affordable housing. 481 new units completed so far in that affordable housing tax shift that developers are part of. Another $2 billion went to kickstart affordable housing projects that were stalled by funding shortfalls, and nearly $2 billion more was spent on emergency rental assistance. You know, we've had wildfire seasons and the COVID pandemic, and that puts extra pressure on housing. So to be fair to California, our housing situation already an issue with insanely high priced housing to start. And then all the homelessness issues that Texas has and beyond. And then you add some of these natural events like the wildfires. It's tough. And COVID, of course, which affected all of us. The plan to formulate a pandemic plan for the state's homeless population was worked on by a Dr. Margot Kushel. There's a hefty report, apparently, that they just produced. It's a survey of nearly 3,200 unhoused people across California. Largest representative study of homelessness since the mid-1990s, Dr. Margot Kushel says. Director of the UCSF Center for Vulnerable Populations, commissioned by the state to find out who was homeless in California and why. And this is the issue in any political race in California. Kushel's report apparently got rid of some myths along the way. Number one, that many people on the street don't want a home. Not true, says Kushel. Participants overwhelmingly wanted permanent housing. Number two, many people on the streets of California are not from California. You know, there's this sense that everybody comes to California to be homeless. And that's not true. 9 out of 10 people lost their stable housing here. They are Californians. And myth number 3, mental illness is the driving force behind homelessness. Yes, 66% of respondents did report, quote, symptoms of mental health conditions currently. But to argue a solution is more complicated than writing rent checks, is what's suggested here. Kushel questioned if mental health problems led to homelessness or if it was the other way around. People end up homeless and they kind of lose it. Most of those people, of that 66%, have severe depression or severe anxiety. Not surprising if you're experiencing homelessness, she said. Still, tackling the mental health issues among the unhoused is a major plank, according to this report, in the Newsom administration's effort. We're taking a new approach, he said. Rather than reforming in the margins a system that is foundationally and fundamentally broken, is what he wants to address. I mean, you know, Gavin Newsom, as usual, says the right things, and to be fair, sometimes does the right things, but clearly, this is a fail. You can't spend that kind of money and get such marginal results. Now, one of the things he's done is it the care courts?
Yeah, that's on the way in. You know, it's being challenged, and I don't know what the current state of the legal challenge is, but I guess we're close to getting care courts, which would
so
force
care courts,
people
I
off,
think, are a game changer, and bravo for that. I mean, effectively, you can force some people into mental health help,
and
relative social
drug
services,
help.
and drug help. Thank you. And sometimes that's a real issue. I mean, a lot of the time. So that would
you have all these
that would address
outreach
part of the
people,
problem.
but you can offer help and people don't have to take it, right? So you have a lot of people that just say, no, thank you. I'm not going to the shelter. No, thank you. I don't like the rules they have there. No, thank you.
We had a homeless guy against our exterior wall of the house, and he would scream all night.
Oh, God.
And he would bang on the wall and scream all night. He's crazy, okay? I mean, I'm sorry. He just was.
It's just the way it is.
And so we would call. And then when COVID hit, he was coughing like really loudly.
Oh, no.
I thought, well, he's got COVID or something. I don't know what the story is. So we call repeatedly. And what do? They come. They come 3 times this happened. I mean, after the 3rd time, as you'll hear, it's just sort of like, it's a fool's errand. I said, to the guy, we always say the same thing. He's doing these things, and they come back around. And these are paramedics. The paramedics say, all we can do is ask him if he wants help. All we can do is ask him if he needs medical assistance. All we can do is ask him. If he turns us down, we cannot move him. And there was nothing we could do. We just had to live with this guy slamming on the walls and, yelling.
Miserable. How long was he there?
About 6 months.
Oh.
Courtney was completely unnerved by it, and
why did he pick your house? Do you live like in a very populated thoroughfare kind of area?
We were living in Venice, California. We had to move from our neighborhood because our home burned. Our home burned. The neighborhood burned down.
And that's what you moved into.
Yeah, we had to move there, and it was a gorgeous house. I mean, gorgeous. Yeah. It was really a nice house.
Yeah.
And it was across the street from a noted artist in Los Angeles named John Baldessari, who lived in a Frank Gehry house. Frank Gehry, the architect. So I'm telling you, I mention these things because these are kind of a high-end-ish sort of, we were right alongside the golf course where Harrison Ford crashed his plane, you may remember.
Oh.
This Penmar golf course. So my point is, it was not, so you're alongside a golf course, you're, these known architects did the house across the street. You've got this famous artist living across the street. You're in this nice house, and still you're dealing with this homeless guy. There's nothing we could do, Kim. Nothing we could do. We just had to live with him.
Intolerable. Yeah. My heart goes out to the guy, but you can't live like that. That's horrible.
Yeah. And so care courts might have made a difference in that instance. But the mental health side is not the only side. We've got communities in this state that are refusing to build low-income housing, said the governor's advisor, because they say it's all just rapists and child molesters. So that's the dynamic. That's what we're facing. That's out of the governor's office. The state is suing a number of wealthier cities for getting in the way of construction of affordable housing within their borders. We reported that story, and I told Kim, they may be forcing that affordable housing, and there's down the throats of Marin County residents, of
Atherton, San Mateo County.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. It doesn't matter where you live. Anyway, the idea of this homelessness study is a real good one. How much money would people need to make up the shortfall and stay in their homes? The people who are homeless because they don't have the money to pay the rent. You'd be surprised at the numbers. So people are, again, this is a huge study on homelessness. People are mentally ill, some of them, but as we were just saying, it's not quite what we think of. And then there are a bunch of people who are homeless because they can't afford a home. So how much money would people need to make up the shortfall and stay in their homes? Here's the quote from the doctor who did the study. One of the surprising things was how optimistic people were that relatively small amounts of money would have prevented their homelessness. For a lot of them, $300 to $500 a month would do the trick.
That's a minuscule compared to how much we're spending, right?
Thank you. That's exactly the point. You're spending all this money if you would just cut checks, supplemental checks. Food stamps are a guarantee. Healthcare is a guarantee. Public education is a guarantee, said the governor's spokesperson. Housing, 25% chance. Essentially saying you should be guaranteed of some housing in California. Now, the doctor who did the report, the Dr. Kushel, was asked how the state officials responded to seeing, the real breakdown, the first comprehensive breakdown on homelessness in California since the 90s. And Kushel said, I think they're on board. I think they're relatively on board. I don't agree with everything but I think they're trying. Asked what she doesn't agree with, she's refused to say. She said, I don't know. I mean, as you can hear, I really want to have a single-minded focus on getting people into permanent housing. And I think that is the root of how we end homelessness. Yep. She did agree that some politicians might be more focused on the window dressing of getting people off the street into shelters or motels rather than actually into permanent housing. And then the governor's office is saying, hey, we're facing a tidal wave and we're doing the best we can. That's a quote. To make, it's the idea somehow that we're just doing window dressing is something that they push back on in the state.
I know they're trying, but it's wasting the taxpayers' money and throwing good money after bad if you're just chucking money at a problem with no results. We have more homeless people now than we did when the throwing of the money of the $17.5 billion started 4 years ago. So that's not a problem solver. What we're doing isn't working.
Well,
we need a complete revamp.
To our Southern California viewers and listeners who live in Los Angeles, Mayor Bass launched a program called Inside Safe to clear street encampments. And she wanted to talk about the success of that, moving 1,300 people off the streets into motels. She met with reporters, but she wouldn't even estimate how many of those people have been moved into permanent housing. And as I was just telling you, that's really the issue here. They have $250 million set aside for this program, Inside Safe, from the $110 million that'll be used to pay for temporary motels. $21 million will be used for permanent housing. It's interesting. I find this report really revealing, Permanent housing is what's needed. And there is the money. There is clearly the money, as Kim says. We're spending so much money. $17.5 billion in just 4 years. And the problem has gotten worse. So, I'll find this report, which I have, and try to post it to Twitter and maybe even to Threads. So you can take a look at it, those people who are interested in a closer look at this issue.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Albert, can you tweet that we're on the air? I didn't even tweet. Maybe you can mention John Rothman, the great one, will be along. And if you would be so kind, I will retweet you. And if you're on Threads, I'll rethread you. In the next half hour, the great John Rothman joins. His perspectives on any number of things. Curious about, he likes to go off on Trump a lot. People love it when he goes off on Trump. But I'm curious about his view of the announcement out of NATO. I think there was no surprise on that, but nonetheless, I want to get his take and more. So we'll get to that. Also, a major closure in the city of San Francisco. I mean, it's a historic closure. We'll tell you about that. And then in the next hour, I have a bit of law and disorder and a That's Rich that's fairly significant as well. Smash the like button for us.
With your iron rod.
Smash with your iron rod. Give us a thumbs up. Welcome Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I have to find your news theme. Oh, there it is.
There it is.
Okay. All's good now.
Nice.
Yeah.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. This report sponsored by the lovely, the amazing people at Tenuta Vineyards. Look at that. Oh,
They are lovely and amazing. Love them.
Oh, yeah, they're nice. The wine's nice. The vineyard's nice. The whole thing's nice. Let's start with this story, though, because it's going to be a heat wave, right? Tropical heat wave coming to California, actually coming to many places around the United States. Millions of Americans are experiencing an extremely dangerous heat wave in the Southwest. The catastrophe of flooding in the Northeast. Meteorologists say a heat dome is expanding from much of Texas into parts of California. Las Vegas and Phoenix are expected to hit triple digits. So here comes the heat. House Republicans taking aim at the head of the FBI over a court order limiting the Biden administration's communication with social media companies. So this is happening. One lawmaker saying the order explains in detail that the FBI was involved in, quote, arguably the most massive attack against free speech in U.S. history. A judge ruled earlier this month the Biden administration likely violated the First Amendment by working with social media companies to suppress unfavorable views relating to the pandemic, the election security, and other issues. It remains to be seen whether they were trying to handle misinformation or whether there was free speech suppression there.
It's interesting to, and I'll maybe ask John Rothman about this too. I think that this question as to the government suppressing information that's on social media platforms is a very interesting one because they're certainly allowed to reach out to these social media platforms. But
not anymore.
The suppression, would seem, if I'm a publicist for the Mark Thompson Show, am I allowed to reach out to social media platforms? Yes, I am. Why can't the government reach out to social media platforms? And now, it's one thing to reach out. It's another thing to force the suppression of information. So, and I'll get Rothman's view of that maybe.
Yeah, interesting. Speaking of interesting, how about Twitter? Twitter is had some issues as of late. Now they're reportedly blocking links to new rival Instagram Threads. According to users, links to threads.net are being blocked in Twitter searches. The move makes it more difficult to jump from one platform to the other and to locate user profiles on Threads. So Twitter taking steps to wipe Threads away from anything regarding Twitter at all. There's not going to be any partnership or marriage between the Twitter and the Threads.
I guess that's probably good business. You got to try to be competitive, right? I mean, try to wall off your. Well, they're the same, so when you're you could play ball with them.
Well, if you see people that are on both, then are you forcing them just to go over to Threads and check out of Twitter if Twitter's has this policy?
Well, you can look at it the other way, and that you're forcing them to stay on your platform. I mean, I think. I mean, again, this is. If you have something that quacks just like what you're doing, which is what Threads is, it's exactly like Twitter, essentially, then I wouldn't link to it in my, look, I'm not an Elon fan, but I understand that move,
I think people might not like those draconian rules and they may decide, I'm out.
Yeah. All right. Draconian's a ding word.
I'll take it. Mortgage rates are at their highest since November. The Mortgage Bankers Association says the average rates for the 30-year fixed rate mortgage went over 7% last week, up from 6.85 the week before. The MBA said the markets expect the Federal Reserve will need to continue to hold rates higher longer to slow inflation.
What the hell is going on in the United States of America?
Yeah.
You remember this shooting happened in Cleveland, Ohio Sunday, left 9 people injured. Well, now a suspect is in custody. Police with an assist from U.S. Marshals arrested 25-year-old Jalen Jennings at a home in Lorain, Ohio On Tuesday, west of Cleveland, Jennings was taken into custody on 9 counts of felonious assault. I'm kind of glad they got these people. This
Felonious
is a story
is a big
Yes, I'm very unhappy with
No, I'm asking
Oh, no,
for the
no.
No, the ding, please. For felonious. Thank you.
Thank you. A San Diego doctor and son have been sentenced and fined for hoarding and price gouging N95 masks. Boo to both of them. At the height of the pandemic, Mona Zodi Mofid and her son Adam allegedly purchased 400,000 masks, and then they sold them, allegedly, for an average of 300 to 400% markup. That according to court documents. At the time, N95 masks were designated as scarce under the Defense Production Act. They were covered under the Act's anti-hoarding and price gouging provisions. You saw those people on Facebook when the pandemic started and the lockdowns began, and you were trying desperately to find masks for you and your family, and you went on eBay or Facebook or wherever, Amazon, and you saw those masks that were astronomically priced. Yeah.
Sure.
Well,
sure. So it's a price gouging thing? Is that what this is? I mean,
Yeah.
is that how they get them? Okay.
The Mofids were fined more than $1.2 million. They were sentenced to 2 years of probation and 200 hours of community service. So I don't know if they were fined more than they made by selling those masks at such a markup, but $1.2 million fine. So there you go.
Yeah. I took advantage of a situation to an extreme, and the law got him.
Law won.
Yeah.
There's never been anything like this.
All right.
Los Angeles County supervisors working on protections for renters during eviction proceedings. Tenants are often overwhelmed and unrepresented in courtrooms, facing landlords with attorneys who understand housing law. To even the playing field, supervisors in Los Angeles County are agreeing to draft an ordinance that would provide lawyers for certain at-risk tenants. The ordinance, which is expected to be ready for consideration within a year, would apply to unincorporated parts of LA County. The annual cost of the program estimated to initially be about $22 million. And lastly, a very quick thinking animal services officer saved a dog's life by using Narcan on a dog. The dog's owner called 911 when the animal collapsed after discovering their prescription medication bottle had been chewed through, and the dog was acting really strangely. Marin County responding animal services officer, her name is Chelsea Myers, says she called an emergency vet who told her, give the dog Narcan. Minutes later, that dog was fine.
Wow.
Because of the instant results, Marin Humane says all animal service officers will now be equipped with Narcan.
Jeez.
So, yeah, that works.
There's that much. What? So you're saying the dog got into some kind of narcotic?
Yeah, some type of medication. Must have been some type of opioid.
That's just
Right.
so brutal.
Chewed through the bottle. Started acting all loopy.
Wow.
Yeah, Narcan worked, I guess. So that's great.
Yeah, it is good.
Again, this report is sponsored by the beautiful people at Tenuta Winery in the beautiful Livermore Valley. And, you know, they've got a lot of choices out at Tenuta. As you know, Mark, because you were recently there, they've got 28 varietals to taste on their tasting room menu. And while you taste, you can have a great conversation and become friends for life. And that is their motto. They say, give us 30 minutes and we will be friends for life.
Wow.
And of course, we've got our exclusive Mark Thompson deal with a 10% discount across the board. All you have to do is call them and say, smash it with your iron rod.
Smash it with your iron rod.
You get your 10% off, 925-699-4576 at Tenuta, Tenuta Vineyards in Livermore. I'm Kim McAllister on The Mark Thompson Show.
They had to close down an entire radio station to silence him. And now, he's here. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Thompson.
I've come from regular stock.
I just want to find 11,780.
Did you really just do that? CDC knows that I feel like this. I've told them. It had nothing to do with them.
May the Spirit guide you in wisdom and grace.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
It was great. I loved it.
60% of the time, it works every time.
Can you let him finish, sir?
Loving having you with us on this Wednesday. Mark here with Kim. Albert's along, and this guy is a fan favorite. We exploit him once a week on this show. Great takes on so many things. Such a terrific historian when it comes to American politics and geopolitics in general. How about it for the great John Rothman, everyone? He does have a podcast, which is very popular. It's screaming up the charts. Albert, do you have his banner? Or can we put up his banner with his podcast to remind everyone that that is the podcast he has? Maybe, Kim, you can do that. Anyway, John, welcome, sir. There it is. It's called Around the World with John Rothman.
Thank you for the plug. I have to tell you, my producer tells me we are approaching 10,000, and we've only been up for 3 weeks. So we're very excited about that. And Around the Political World with John Rothman, just Google it and come along for the ride.
Yeah, that's terrific. It took us how long to get to 10,000, Albert? Took us better part of, I want to say.
I'd say like 6 months, maybe.
Yeah, 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, look at Rothman. Picks up 10K in 3 weeks. All right. I'm not competitive. If I were, I'd realize that I'm losing the competition.
You'll never lose. You're a winner. And by the way, I want to point out, when you were talking about tennis, I couldn't help thinking what a racket that is.
Oh, wow.
Sorry.
Really? You give him applause for that?
Yeah,
that's what got you the 10,000?
Yeah.
Wordplay like that? Well, the crowd likes it. The crowd likes it. All right, you got to get. All right, now, John Rothman, let's get serious here, all right? Now, I want to first double back and just check off on the homeless problem. Here it is. Vilma's asking, how would John Rothman handle the homeless problem in San Francisco? Go ahead.
I talked about it this morning on my podcast. I did it because there is now an effort by some to demonize San Francisco. So the answer is that there is no real answer. But we have, for instance, Live Church, which not only provides meals for thousands, but also provides social services. And it seems to me that that is the model. The model is to be able to help people who need help, and that means social services have to be beefed up. Unfortunately, there is no way to clear the streets of the homeless. And that's not just San Francisco. I was in Portland last week, and they have a similar problem, and we see it across the country. Homelessness is a real crisis for America, and the mental health issues, and particularly fentanyl, remain a serious problem in terms of dealing with the problem. So, and there are limitations. We heard this morning a story, I was fascinated by it, that when you are confronted by the police, if you say you don't want any help, they can't force you to do anything. And as you were recounting to Kim earlier, your encounter with a homeless person who encamped by your back wall, and you essentially for 6 months were left in a position of not being able to solve it. So here's my point, Mark. Any politician who says that they can solve the homeless problem or they can solve the drug problem is not telling you the truth. All we can do is provide the best services we can. I do happen to favor keeping the streets clean. And one of the points I made is that's why we have a DPW, Department of Public Works in San Francisco, and their job should be to keep the streets clean, which is not the case and ought to be.
Well, let me just press you a little bit on this because It sounds like, I mean, to be cynical, I could say, well, that's more of the same then. You're saying provide city services and there's social counseling and Glide Church, et cetera. But that's really, you talk about incremental, that may not even get you incremental progress on this. So let me just press you a little.
You're correct.
So, and you've made the point that any politician who, says they can solve the problem is obviously, misrepresenting something. So I think we all agree to that. But what policies can you see? What leaks in all that money that we're directing toward homelessness are there that could be addressed in some creative way? Is there anything, John?
Yeah, there are several priorities. The first priority is to keep the streets clean. That is to say, you really have to have people out there making sure that streets are clean.
No, wait a minute. When you say the streets are clean, you're talking about literally, all the feces and all of that stuff. But what about the people on the streets, John?
Okay. Well, that's the second point. The second point is that we have to beef up the services we provide people who are on the street. People who want help should be given help. Our problem is the people who don't want help, you can't force them to have help. And anyone who says that there's an answer on that is crazy. Look, Mark, if I had a magic wand and could wave it, that would be one thing. But I had a situation where one of my kids said, can't we just arrest them all and deport them for being vagrants? And of course, vagrancy laws are now unconstitutional. You can't apply those laws. The only thing we can do are the public health aspects, which, by the way, were enforced pretty vigorously at the height of the pandemic. I would suggest that homelessness is a pandemic in San Francisco.
Well, clearly, I don't think you got a lot of argument here. In the chat, they're saying, so as mayor, you would let the homeless people stay on the street the way they are now?
No, absolutely not. What we would have to do is to find vehicles, ways in which, number one, to assure sanitary conditions, and number two, to arrange something, and I don't know what it is, but that will require real thought, to how to get people off the streets. Let me tell you something. I live here in San Francisco. I can drive 3 blocks away from my house, and you have a tent encampment on Masonic. It's unacceptable. And my son lives south of Market, at least for another month. He's giving up his apartment there. And on Mission Street, there are several blocks where you cannot walk without the problem of sanitation and drugs. And there's open drug dealing. If there's open drug dealing, why isn't that stopped? Isn't that something we ought to be doing? And I say it is. If you see someone shooting up or someone using fentanyl, by God, the police, the sheriff's department ought to be there in order to make sure that that doesn't happen. Now, there is a problem, Mark, and I'll be blunt with you. If you don't see it, it doesn't mean it isn't there. They simply shift from one place to another place, and it creates a serious problem. And I would be lying to people, and any politician, whether they were running for mayor or for any public office, would be lying if they said they could clean it up with one fell swoop. All you can do, and I really believe this to be true, is apply sanitation laws. That is to say, the streets must be clean, they must be passable, you can't do drug dealing on the streets. And by the way, I think it's very important to crack down on drug dealers. And that means the individual drug dealer as well.
I'm seeing it in the chat. Can't you go after these people for loitering? Can't you go after these people? The reality, and there is maybe some running room there, but you can't arrest someone for loitering per se. They do a thing, I think, John, you may know this better than I, where if you're loitering to do something, like to commit a crime or to sell alcohol or buy alcohol, or if you're loitering to, in other words, they have to connect it to another activity besides just being there. Although failure to disperse is a crime, John.
But there's a presumption of innocence. That is to say, you cannot arrest someone or detain someone on the premise that you think they're going to do something. That's a serious problem. But let me make clear, it's not just San Francisco. It's across every community in the United States. And we in San Francisco are blessed with good climate. We talked about climate last week, but let me just point out what's happening in Florida, what's happening in Southern California, what's happening all over the place in terms of climate. And this climate problem is going to create an even more serious problem. We in San Francisco have a mild climate, and we are a community which wants to help people, and that makes us even more attractive. I'm not sure that's a negative. I think it's important that people understand what San Francisco and what our positions represent. But
wanting to help people is one thing, but I mean, here, loitering is the least of it. They're dealing, using, defecating, fornicating.
And that should not be permitted.
Yeah. No, it's true.
What can I
If
tell
you get it in order, you get extra
If I were
points.
mayor of San Francisco, there would be enforcement, and I would insist on it, and I'm sure then I'd be attacked as someone who is violating civil liberties. But you should not have a civil liberty which takes away a civil liberty from someone else. And here in San Francisco, you've been to the Golden Gate Theater lately? Have you seen the loitering around the Golden Gate Theater?
You can't even get into the theater.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And that's the kind of thing where there has to be action taken. And I commend Mayor Breed. I want to say something positive about what the mayor has done. She's now coordinating the sheriff's department, the police department, the law enforcement here in San Francisco. Gavin Newsom, to his credit, is now putting highway patrol into San Francisco. But you said something, Mark, that really hit me. We have spent countless millions of dollars on this problem with virtually no result, which means I think you got to bring together the best minds in the city, business, labor, management, communities, neighborhoods. I want to know what neighborhood groups are saying about this. Restaurant owners who are having a terrible problem now with loitering as you go into a restaurant. I mean, unless we solve these problems, then San Francisco is in trouble. But I want to make very clear, and I talked about it this morning on my podcast, and I talked about the demonization of San Francisco. There is a demonization taking place, which we have to resist as well. This is a great city with great opportunities, with marvelous restaurants, with marvelous views, with marvelous people who live here. And we need to reinforce that positive thing. That includes, by the way, the problem we're now having with businesses moving out of San Francisco and massive vacancies.
I mean, I just saw that Anchor Brewery is closing.
Brewery is closing. And this is a tremendous blow to an independent business here in San Francisco. I happen to know someone who worked at Anchor Brewery for many, many years, very proud of what they did. These are the kinds of things where I don't know whether government can make a difference, but I do know the people of San Francisco have to unite, and we have to get our business and political leaders together and our labor leaders together to figure out if there are real solutions. And Mark, it may be there are no solutions, and that should really blow us away.
Well, there has to be a strategy, and in that latest report that I was talking about in the last half hour lays it out. Most people, I mean, really, the majority of homeless people are looking for permanent housing. So this permanent housing that can be set up, can be purchased, can be built, that will address a big chunk of this problem. But some of these other problems you talk about, like drug abuse and, you know, this horror show that is some of the streets of San Francisco and other cities, Los Angeles and et cetera, and Sacramento and across the country, that isn't addressed by permanent housing.
You're right. And affordable housing is an oxymoron. There is no affordable housing. And when you build affordable housing, theoretically, it doesn't stay affordable very long because there's greater and greater demand. So this is a serious issue which cannot be solved by one person, which cannot be solved by one government. It requires people to come together. Look, Mark, when we had the AIDS crisis here in San Francisco, it was a disaster for businesses, for people in this city. What did the city do? We came together, we put together a program, including health services, in order to try to mitigate what was a growing disaster. We've seen, I remember, and many of you do, the great earthquake that took place not so many years ago. We were devastated. What do? We came together and we resolved the issues. This is a thing which is only going to be resolved by serious people working together in San Francisco. And that means all segments of the city, not particular ethnic or religious or political groups, but all the people. And let me tell you, leadership requires we bring them together. I always remember former Mayor George Christopher, who was a good friend of mine, who said that during his term of office, there were serious issues over labor negotiations. And he said, look, John, he said, I simply brought labor and business together, put them in a room and said, let's work this out because it hurts all of us and it hurts the city. And if we believe, as I do, that this is a great city, And this is not just San Francisco, as you point out. It's Los Angeles. It's all over California. We better work together to solve the problem, or it's only going to grow. And climate change, by the way, and I mentioned this very briefly, is only going to exacerbate the problem. Because people who live in climates where you can't live are going to move to climates where you can live, and it's going to be a serious problem. If you want to live somewhere with a mild climate, it's San Francisco. And even though we're going to have a heat wave this weekend, evidently,
well, not in San Francisco. I mean, you'll have it around the Bay Area, but in the city, it'll be like 75 degrees or something.
Right.
You know?
You're right, and that will mean more and more.
That brings, but you're saying it's a magnet as things get worse elsewhere. Yeah. He used a ding word, Albert, and I don't know what it is. I forget because I was paying attention to what John was saying, but I remember registering that it was a ding. Exacerbate, that's what it was. Thank you. So, John, my last follow-up, and then I want to turn to national and international. Essentially, just to understand your position, your thought is to put together a task force or a group that regularly meets, maybe monthly meetings. You're talking about business owners, religious leaders, homeless advocates, etc. And you want to put them together.
Not on a monthly meeting. I would bring them together immediately, and I would say,
we're
going to work on this. And we have 72 hours. Let's come up with concrete things that we can do, not to solve the problem, but to ameliorate the problem, to provide some services. And let's take a look at where we're spending our money. Are we spending our money in a place which is truly effective? And what are our immediate goals? I'm going to tell you, and I said it before, cleaning the streets. When I was a kid, do you know how they solved part of the unemployment problem here in San Francisco? They hired street sweepers. They didn't have machines doing it. They had people come in, and the streets were really cleaned, and you made sure they were clean. That's the kind of thing we need to do in San Francisco. And by the way, for those people who are homeless and who need employment, that might not be a bad way of putting people to work in their own neighborhoods in order to clean things up. I take a walk in the Tenderloin, or I take a walk south of Market, and I see what's happening, and it's just a disaster. But I believe in San Francisco. This city had a slogan for years, the city that knows how. And that's what we have to do, and we can only do it if we get together and really come up with concrete action.
You know, I made the point before that we're all a couple of personal crises away from living in our car. I mean, it could happen to any of us, but I love San Francisco, and I love that you love San Francisco the way you do. And I get the pride associated with living in the city and with the values reflected in the city and the diversity in the city and all these things. But John, you have to admit, it's out of control. Not just homelessness, the crime. And businesses are shuttering. I just mentioned Anchor Brewery, but I'm talking about businesses across every place from North Beach to Market Street.
You're 100% correct. And that's why immediate action, we can't wait for the next election, Mark. This is something which needs to be addressed today by our current political leadership. They have to put the next election aside, personal ambition aside. They have to work as a unit. That's what we did during the AIDS crisis. You remember what we had to do here in San Francisco and how effective it was, and the anger in the community when the bathhouses were closed, for instance. The anger, the cries of discrimination. And yet what happened was a plus for the people of San Francisco, all the people of San Francisco. And that's the kind of immediate action that I think we need now. And I hope we're able to do it.
I'll tell you one thing, as mayor, you will gain, were you ever to ascend to that position, you would gain tremendous support immediately if you were to clean the streets. I mean, I love that you come back to that. It's sort of like the pothole thing. You know what I mean? I mean, if you really address it, honestly, that is an issue. And in cleaning the streets, you have to deal on some level with those who are living on the streets. So that would. Yeah.
But let me tell you, whether I choose to run for mayor, and I am giving it serious thought, and I have a lot of support, but whether I choose to run or not, the real issue will be what we do because the election isn't until November of 2024. It's what happens now. We can't let it get worse. And so what I'm suggesting ought to be undertaken by people in positions of authority now. London Breed is the mayor of San Francisco, the board of supervisors, all of those entities that exist need to be willing to tackle the problem now because we can't afford to wait.
And I like what Kim said before. You know, she was talking about what they're doing in Texas, and you look at Los Angeles, and Los Angeles looks at San Francisco, et cetera. And Sacramento looks at both. We're almost out of time, but I just want to quickly ask you about the world stage, world events, and politics. What's moving your meter?
Well, I listened this morning to the president who spoke at the NATO summit in Lithuania, and my son asked me a very simple question. Why aren't we admitting Ukraine right now? And the answer is because of Article 5. If Ukraine were admitted, all of the Western nations associated with NATO would then be at war with Russia. And what Joe Biden is doing is proceeding very prudently, saying to the Ukrainians, yes, you'll get in, but the war has to end first. And in the meantime, we're going to give you what you need. I want to make my position clear on cluster weapons. I hate that term. It's a euphemism. Cluster weapons are cluster bombs. And those of us who have had any experience in warfare understand that it is a deadly weapon. And it is the last thing we ought to be providing because it doesn't solve a problem. More than that, where are they dropping these cluster bombs? And I'm going to use the term bombs, not weapons. They're dropping them in Ukraine, which means that when the war is over, we're going to have to clean up that mess as well. NATO, the allies have to work directly to try to ameliorate and provide the situation that Ukraine needs, understanding that this is going to be a long haul. And to Joe Biden's credit, he has said that, and I give him a lot of credit for it. He's not talking about copping out. One other quick comment. I listened this morning to the director of the FBI giving testimony before the House of Representatives. And I want to make clear, I am horrified by the Republicans on that committee who continue to go after the director and the FBI as an institution, continuing to press these outrageous things. Look at the whole Joe Biden, Hunter Biden thing. The man who the Republicans were counting on to be their key link in the chain that would nail the Bidens, well, is now under indictment himself and has no credibility. And the Republicans have to wake up and deal with this. Let me also quickly say, because I do like to talk about Donald Trump, these next few weeks, Mark, are going to be absolutely fascinating because Donald Trump is going to be indicted. There's no question about it. He's going to be indicted again in Georgia, and he's going to be indicted again on the January 6th. And the Republicans may go crazy. And one of the most disturbing things to me is that every time he's indicted, Donald Trump's ratings go up. One other quick point. I know we're running out of time.
Well, he's shown some softening, actually, in the last couple of weeks, John. I mean, that is, his overall numbers are beginning to soften a bit. Right? But, yeah, I will grant you the fact that he's still way ahead of everyone else.
All he has to do in Iowa, all he has to do in New Hampshire is to win 25, 30, 35, 40% of the vote, which the polls say he will, and he'll have the nomination in hand.
Right.
And let me say a quick word about this question of the woman's right to choose. The decision that Mike Pence has made to support these efforts to 6 weeks until you ban abortion completely is absolutely wrong. And we're seeing this in a major state of this union where a bill is going to be signed on Friday by a Republican governor with a Republican legislature to do that. And it's so horrifying to me. So there are a whole host of issues, Mark. We don't have enough time.
No, I mean, that's why you have your great podcast, sir, because you can address many of these things. But you've touched on a lot. I was going to follow up on this. Randy says, apparently cluster bombs is the last thing we have because Biden pretty much came out and admitted that we're running short in the U.S. on other munitions, didn't he?
Let me point out, and I say this very respectfully, we do not produce munitions in large numbers. We produce weapons that we need. Joe Biden's been in office 2 years. Look back and see that the munitions production under Donald Trump would have produced the same result. The problem is that no one expected that there would be a ground war in Europe, the largest ground war in Europe since World War II. And how do you prepare for that? How do you deal with it now? Frankly, Vladimir Putin has to be held accountable. I don't blame Joe Biden any more than I would actually blame Donald Trump. This has been a consistent problem in terms of our lack of preparation because we don't want to have to prepare for this kind of ground war. We're sitting here in the United States of America, but do you know what a ground war in Ukraine means? I have friends in Ukraine, and I get these reports, and I'm horrified by what's happening on the ground. And there is no real focus on what is essentially a major war. And let me point out, we have a nuclear plant, the largest nuclear plant in Europe, which the Russians now control, but they have weapons all the way around it. And if that plant were blown the same way the Russians blew the dam, which caused major flooding, believe me, we'd have a major international crisis.
Let me just ask you again and follow up, and then we'll wrap up with John Rothman. But you then have strongly said here just now that you oppose providing these cluster bombs to Ukraine. What happens then? So you're now president of the United States, and or you're master of the world in this case, and just for this hypothetical, what would you do then?
I would ramp up production on the kinds of weapons that they really can use, the kind of munitions they can really use. I would sit down with the best military people and say, what do we need to do? And their answer is not going to be cluster bombs, because cluster bombs don't win a war.
So cluster bombs, as you know, are used to dig out a lot of the trenched in troops of your enemy, your opposition, in this case, the Russians. Mm-hmm. And they are trenched in, as you're also aware, in these portions of Ukraine that they're having trouble dislodging them from. So the answer is that they feel these cluster bombs are the way. Now, I'm not advocating for them. In fact, I think it's an abhorrent thing. But that said, it is explained by many who know this sort of military theater that is the way to address the fact that the Russians are dug in these trenches.
The only way this can be done properly, Mark, is to get the Russians out. That means world pressure. Many nations are still having economic ties with Russia. It's not the kind of economic boycott or pressure that should have been applied. There are a variety of things that can be done, that should be done, that are not being done. And let me tell you, I'm in favor of giving the Ukrainians whatever they need in order to do it. I have no problem with that. My problem with cluster bombs is that the minute they use the euphemism cluster weapons, I hit the roof. I said, if you're going to give it to them, explain what it really is. You understand what a cluster bomb is. And eventually, the people who are going to suffer are the people of Ukraine. I don't think it's a weapon that's a legitimate weapon of war. And that's the reason why so many nations, over 100 nations in the world, have advocated for banning these kinds of weapons. But you know what, Mark? They deal with what they have to deal with. And Zelensky wants the West to be actively involved. Why do you think he wants to get into NATO so quickly? Because under Article 5, we would all be at war with Russia.
Sure, Zelensky's doing what he has to do, which is to try to draw us in.
Biden, to his credit, doesn't want to get into a war with Russia. But it comes to another question, and it's something we can talk about at another time, and that is, how far do we go in this battle?
Well, that's kind of sort of what I was saying or getting to with the questions about cluster bombs. I mean, okay, great, call them cluster bombs, whatever, and you don't want to give them to Ukraine. Great. Now what do you want to do? How involved do you want to be? Do you want to see Ukraine fall? I mean, I know you don't want that, but I guess what I'm trying to say is all of these various junctures in this confrontation are played out this way. Like, if you don't help, they're falling.
Cluster bombs will not win anything for the Ukrainians. It's an oxymoron when you talk about that.
So why do they exist then as a weapon? I don't mean to press this. I'm really asking the question.
No, I think it's a great question. Why? We have a surplus because we don't use them. We have a surplus of those kinds of weapons. But there are many weapons that we could be using, that we have sent them, which have been effective, which we need to resupply them with, which means, if you want to be completely blunt, we have to gear up our factories in this country to produce those weapons. And the Europeans will have to cooperate in that as well. But look, how do you fight a war with one hand tied behind your back? What is the reason we do not go all in? Because Russia has a nuclear capability. And our fear, and Joe Biden's fear, and he's expressed it very eloquently, his fear is that there will be a nuclear conflagration if this thing is pushed too far. And
you don't think we're all in now, John? I mean, I know we don't have troops on the ground, but it's a proxy war. I mean, we're pretty all in, I would say, already.
No,
I mean, how much money have we spent? I mean, just look at money and weaponry and,
billions. I heard the report this morning, billions. But we've avoided a direct confrontation with Russian troops. And I would point out to you, the cluster bomb would not be used on Russia. It would be used in Ukraine.
Yeah, it would be used on Russians in Ukraine.
Right. Inevitably, then you're going to hit Ukrainians too.
Well, right. I mean, the idea would be that it would be, again, not to get too in the weeds, but that it would be directed toward these trenches, although I saw Huge in Japan who kind of knows, I've just noticed his comments have sort of been pretty well informed, I think. He says it wouldn't help with trenches, but we had David K. Johnson on the Pulitzer Prize winner yesterday. He said that is actually how you address trench warfare. And Huge in Japan is also saying this is, I mean, again, individual bomblets dropped en masse from drones into trenches. That works, he says. There is a school of thought which is that they are going to dismantle many of these cluster weapons, cluster bombs, and take a lot of the innards out and then attach them to drones. As I'd heard that from somebody. Again,
the horror of it
is
almost indescribable.
And the first casualty of war is the truth. So I have no idea what actually is happening there, nor do any of us. But yeah.
But let me tell you, the interesting thing for Joe Biden is the political differences now within the Democratic Party over the question of the use of these weapons. But let's be clear. Let's not just say cluster weapons, because that doesn't define it. It is a bomb with a devastating effect, which can have an impact years afterward. I was drawing the analogy with a friend the other day of Agent Orange. We know the impact of these things. Please note, Agent Orange is not being used against the Russians. Do you know why? Because there was an agreement made by nations not to use that kind of weapon. After World War I, there was a decision not to use poison gas. That's why we didn't see the kind of gas that was used during World War I in World War II. We saw gas used in a different way in World War II, a more fateful, a more destructive way. But,
well, I mean, you talk about agreements, and Agent Orange is a good example. But there was an agreement, a worldwide agreement on cluster bombs, and we didn't sign it. I mean, there's a worldwide agreement on the Hague and the International Court, and we don't sign that either. I mean, I think we're a lawless nation that way. We're not ready to now. And go ahead. I can see you
lawless, but I do want to agree with you. We have made certain choices. I was deeply involved in the genocide treaty struggle. For years, the United States would not sign the genocide treaty. Finally, we did, but it took years of persistent effort on the part of many of us who were involved in the human rights struggle. These things take time, but I have to tell you what worries me. It's the same thing going back to where we started on the streets of San Francisco. You can think of these in global terms, but you have to think of it on individual terms. The devastation to individuals, whether it's on the streets of San Francisco because of drugs, or whether it is in Ukraine where the Ukrainian people themselves are suffering. And the fact is, when the United Nations was created in San Francisco in 1945, the whole goal was to prevent these kinds of things happening in war. And although it's prevented a third world war, I think the UN can take credit for that. Actually, what credit is deserved is because of nuclear capability. We should be afraid of what we've developed, and we need to have responsible leadership to deal with it. And I agree with those nations who would not produce the cluster bomb, not weapon, but bomb, because of its danger. It's just an abhorrent weapon. I agree on that.
Leslie Van Houten, the Manson follower, who just got out after 49 years locked up, would you have released her or not?
No, I would not have released her. What she did and the participation, none of the Manson gang should ever be released. She can go through rehab in jail. She can lead a constructive life behind bars, but she should not be granted freedom. And if I'd been governor, that would have been my position.
John Rothman.
Wait. I lived in Los Angeles during those days. I'll never forget the terror that they brought. But may I say, it's always a high honor and great personal privilege, and I look forward to next Wednesday.
Well, I enjoy it as well, my friend. Catch him on the podcast Around the World with John Rothman.
Around the political world.
Around the political world with John Rothman. Put it together for John Rothman. Thanks, John Rothman.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Little lively conversation with John Rothman. Always a fun thing. He'll be back next week, and of course, you can listen to him on his podcast, Around the Political World with John Rothman. Now, we have much still ahead. I've got the great Josh Robert Thompson come in the last half hour of the show.
I love that guy. That's cool.
He's so... You love John Rothman or you love Josh Robert Thompson?
Both. I love them all.
All right. Kim, do you want to do some news?
Sure.
And then I will button on the other side of your news a couple of stories.
Okay.
Maybe that's rich if there's time.
You were talking about that Anchor Steam closure. I want to hear more about that. So, yeah.
Yes, we'll get to that as well. Smash the like button like a boss. Hit it hard.
Smashed it with your iron rod.
Give it a thumbs up. Cost you nothing, and it helps us. Rothman had 10,000 subscribers to his podcast in 3 weeks. What a loser I am.
No.
God. I blame you, Albert.
Don't forget.
Albert, thank you.
He comes on this show, so all the work you've done building up all the subscribers has benefited him.
That's right. Thank you.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah, you know who I am.
All the time. I don't know what the hell they do it for.
They only
They
found
do this
him
to me all the
because
time. I don't
he's
know what the
with
hell
you.
they do it for.
Thank you, Albert. You're right.
Just saying.
So you're saying essentially we can claim credit for having launched John Rothman. He waited for us to do the heavy lifting to build an audience. And then he just swoops in and goes, hey, baby, I got a podcast every day. Subscribe. John Rothman Around the Political World.
No doubt it's a brilliant podcast, but I'm just saying
don't pay Rothman compliments like that.
We have lifted it up and sent
We
it
have
forward.
brilliance too.
Yes. It's
I
true.
actually have heard it. I listened to it quite a bit, and he is really, look, he's terrific. But I now am aware. Thank you. I want to thank my colleagues, Kim and Albert, for pointing out that essentially he owes his success to us. Thank you, everybody.
Do you know who I am? I'm kind of a big deal.
Yeah, really, just saying. That's, I don't know why I didn't have clarity on that point before, but thank you, Kim.
Happy to be here, proud to serve.
I do now have clarity. Smash the like button, as I've said. Kim's News next. Thank you, Gordon Andrews.
Nice.
For $5 in the virtual tip jar.
Big shout out.
Yeah. I'm working for tips, everybody. I was hoping someday I'd be working for tips, and I am. Thank you guys for helping to keep us on the air.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Wait a minute, stop. I want to change that. I don't like that. Right now I'm getting rid of it. It's too loud.
It is too loud, but I don't know if I'd get rid of it.
Well, I'm getting rid of that particular recording of it.
Oh.
So what is this one? Okay, we'll use this one.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. NATO will never waver in its support of Ukraine. And I have a bit of sound from NATO today from the president's speech. Here's what President Joe Biden had to say.
Our commitment to Ukraine will not weaken. We will stand for liberty and freedom today, tomorrow, and for as long as it takes.
And that is President Joe Biden speaking today. He declared that in a speech wrapping up a 2-day NATO summit in Lithuania. The president calling out Russian President Vladimir Putin by name, saying Putin wrongly believed NATO would break apart when he launched his investigation. But President Biden said the alliance is now stronger and more energized than ever, with recent additions of Finland and imminent membership of Sweden. President Biden earlier today held a bilateral meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky as well. As you spoke about a little earlier, Mark, the head of the FBI is now defending the Bureau's credibility. I'm gonna get a picture. I'm missing all my pictures today. Oh man. Here, I have this great picture of NATO flags. Let's just look at it, cuz. Look at that. Isn't that a nice NATO picture? All right. Here's Christopher Wray, head of the FBI. And today, he is defending the Bureau's credibility in testimony before the White House Judiciary Committee. The FBI Director, Christopher Wray, said the agency is made up of patriots, professionals, and dedicated public servants. This comes as House Republicans have accused the agency of being weaponized against conservatives, including former President Trump and his allies. Congress today taking a deep dive into the flow of drugs across our southwest border. Republicans on the House Homeland Security Committee claiming the head of Homeland Security is failing on the job. Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas will not be part of today's hearing. A sad situation in Alabama where police say 2 firefighters were shot this morning in what is being called a targeted attack at this firehouse. The Birmingham fire chief said both men were shot at the station after someone entered through a door reserved for residents to get their blood pressure checked and for other services. Investigators say it looks like this was a targeted attack. One of these firefighters shot in critical condition at the hospital right now. There is a new lawsuit accusing Google of stealing data from millions of users in order to train its AI products. The suit points to a recent Google privacy policy update that says the company, does anyone ever read those? Google has a new privacy policy update. Click here. Yeah, right. Click ignore.
Click a 14-page terms and conditions. Right.
Click get off my screen is what we do, but then we don't see this is what it says, right? The policy update says the company may use publicly accessible information to train AI models. One of the attorneys filing the lawsuit says publicly available has never meant free use for any purpose. Speaking of AI, Elon Musk is announcing the formation of a brand new company focused on artificial intelligence. Here's the logo. It's called XAI. That's a weird one. You can see me behind it.
Yeah.
XAI is what it's called. He's been talking about plans to build a rival to ChatGPT for the last few months. So the company, XAI, unveiled its website and a team of 12 staffers. And while Musk doesn't really like San Francisco that much, apparently he's trying to attract Bay Area, Silicon Valley engineers and developers to XAI. The company will be led by Musk, will work closely with Twitter, Tesla, and other companies to make progress toward its mission, which is to understand the true nature of the universe.
Oh my God, he is so full of S. It's a
XAI.
Yeah, okay. It's AI, and I'm sure that it's I'm sure he wants dominance over this world, but yeah.
Yeah, XAI. We're going to move on. SAG-AFTRA. Hollywood Studios.
Yeah.
Hollywood Studios preparing for a possible actor strike. SAG-AFTRA's current contract with studios expires just about midnight tonight, Pacific time, Wednesday, 11:59 p.m., and the clock is a-ticking. If a deal isn't reached by then, actors' work stoppage will happen, joining writers already on strike for more than 2 months. So,
no, you had the story, didn't you, about Fran Drescher being over in...
Well, she's a brand ambassador for Dolce & Gabbana. She's got to be in Italy at the fashion show. I don't know what you expect. This is
while she's the lead negotiator for SAG-AFTRA, and she's in Italy. I
mean, complain over here. More than 1 in 3 Americans are going through a sleep divorce. Look at her taking up all the room. What a bed hog. It's when... This is when someone regularly or occasionally sleeps in another room than their partner in order to get some rest without distractions like snoring or alarms or kicking or being a bed hog or farting or whatever it is. This data came to light in a survey from the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, which found sleep divorce was the most prominent among millennials. 43% of millennial couples say they sleep in different rooms.
No, I mean, I support it if it means, peace in the neighborhood. Yeah. I think if you're, if you're snoring, if you're restless, why should your sleep pattern influence your partner's sleep pattern?
Sure.
So if you've got the room, crash somewhere else.
Some people feel like, I think when it kind of gets in your head, when you can't sleep, you look at all the different reasons why you can't sleep, right? And then all of a sudden it becomes your partner's problem, perhaps. I don't know.
I the other night, it's 3 a.m. and Courtney's like, like I can't get to sleep. And she slams her head back in the pillow, and I'm going, I get it. You can't sleep, but why does it have to be announced in this way to the other person who is sleeping? So now neither one of us slept the other night because of that.
Because then you can take steps to help.
My bad. I'm sorry.
I was really having trouble sleeping. Yeah, no kidding. I know. I could tell.
Yeah, she's needing a little loving. That's what happened there.
Yeah, is that
Come
it?
on.
Yeah.
Let's, get with it. Get with the program, Thompson.
I see. All right.
I'm Kim McAllister. This is the Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
Yeah, we are back, everyone, and it is exciting to enter into the final turn. The last half hour of the show will feature Josh Robert Thompson, the brilliant voice of so much. You'll know he does Morgan Freeman, he does Arnold Schwarzenegger, he does Trump, of course, and a bunch of different voices on Family Guy. He's just funny, delightful. He does a George Lucas, not only the voice, but he has full-on makeup, and he'll go as George Lucas to Comic-Con. And the Comic-Coners start to circle around him, believing that he's George Lucas. It's very kind of funny. He's shot some viral stuff. And I think Comic-Con's coming up, so we can we'll talk to him about that and more. I did want to mention that the historic Anchor Brewing Company, this is a piece of San Francisco. Let me put my credibility glasses on to tell you it's going to shut down. No longer making beer. This is the end of a 127-year run for Anchor Brewing Company. They were losing around $10 million a year since COVID, and they just couldn't get it back. Quote, "This is an extremely difficult decision that we reached only after many months of careful evaluation. We recognize the importance and historic significance of Anchor to San Francisco and to the craft brewing industry, but the impacts of the pandemic, inflation, especially in San Francisco, and a highly competitive market left us with no option but to make this sad decision to cease operations. The brewery is going to continue to distribute their remaining stock of beer and operate their on-site tap room through the end of this month. And then they'll begin the process of, handling creditors and trying to, take care of debt. They were founded in 1896.
So sad, because it seems like you see Anchor Steam there on the left. At least Anchor Steam, it seems like it's in every bar. It's on tap all over the place. It's a very popular beer. So if it's so popular, how come they're not making money from this?
Yeah. The answer, I think, is they introduced new products, and let's take them at their word. The fact that they were operating in a more and more competitive environment. They were bought for around $85 million by the Japanese beer giant Sapporo in 2017. And then employees at Anchor unionized in 2019 following that sale. And the union was in the process of negotiating its second contract. And they went, you know what? Management said, we're just going to go away. Over the past several years, they were implementing a variety of measures. I don't know why that's over me, but those of you watching. A variety of measures to improve the business, such as releasing new products, product renewals, as I was mentioning, and making brand investments. But Anchor's business performance continued to be sluggish. and it will close. It was founded. Let me see if I can find. Hang on a second. Sorry,
I think it had something to do with fog.
I thought it was the gold rush, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, they've been around for almost 130 years.
Founded in 1896 when Ernst Barth and Otto Schenkel Jr. brought a beer and billiards hall on Pacific Street in San Francisco and dubbed it Anchor. The original location burned down in the blazes that followed the 1906 earthquake. The brewery is most famous for its Gold Rush era steam-style beer, Anchor Steam. The news of this closure comes just a month after Anchor decided to stop distribution nationwide to focus on California. That makes up 70% of its sales.
Here's the building. And I don't know if this closure of Anchor Steam means the building is left vacant. So yet another, building in San Francisco gone. If you take a tour of Anchor Steam, on the roof, they have this whole thing there they do with the fog and brewing and all kinds of things. It's very interesting.
Have you toured Anchor? Yeah, have you done that, Albert? Anchor Steam seems like
I have not.
Seems on brand for you. I'm surprised by that. You like
it's kind of like one of those
beer.
things where it's in the city and it's kind of out of the way to get there. But I know it's always there, so I could always go.
Not anymore, pal.
I kind of put it on the back burner of things to do.
Sometimes the very things we think will be there forever are the first things to go. Alas.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Well, 2 were taken to the hospital after a collision on the tarmac at SFO. You saw that. Happened yesterday. Not airplanes that hit each other. They were the support vehicles, I believe. 2 airport service vehicles were taken. 2 drivers of 2 airport service vehicles were taken to the hospital. Their vehicles collided on the tarmac at SFO. Caused a long delay for an Alaska air flight to New York. How does that happen? I ask you, Albert. Don't they have their act together out there?
I'd hope,
Guess not.
Yeah. Leslie Van Houten, the Manson follower, as I was mentioning, released after 49 years locked up. When you read about what she did, I guess she was a model prisoner, but when you read about what she did, it was so heinous, it was so grotesque. It's hard to imagine that it would be okay to release her.
Yeah, and this was, I think, the Governor Newsom had said no several times, and
yeah,
Jerry Brown had said no, and then finally, here we have. This is her when she was a Manson follower at the very beginning of this journey in prison, and here is what she looks like today as she gets out of jail, or prison, as one would call it.
Yeah.
So that's 40 years in lockup.
Yeah, I'm sure she's a different person on some level, but it just seems as though, I don't know, it seems as though, again, it might be a big reach.
Yeah.
Given what she did. So, but she will walk. And as Kim says, there was a lot of resistance for a long time, but finally they've let her skate.
Yeah.
So, smash the like button like a boss. We'll take a quick musical interlude, and then the great Josh Robert Thompson joins us here. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Smash it with your iron rod.
Who's Mark Thompson?
Hey, which one of you is Mark Thompson?
What he's got going here is a situation.
It's unbelievably offensive.
Put up your pants, my man. Pull up those pants.
Ralph Nader just sent me a book. Did he send you one too?
I offer this sincere apology to you today.
Everything is going extremely well.
Call me a liar. Know what you call him?
You, sir, are a liar.
You are a cover-up artist, and you are a liar.
Why a liar? Your pants are on fire!
Google told me.
Can you let him finish, sir?
It was wrong, it was stupid, and I'm trying to be a better person.
No.
I'm going to tell you what I think.
What are the porn stars doing?
Do you have a secret now?
Doesn't anybody but a weed?
It's 100% effective. How about that?
Say what?
And this is their new host.
There is no defense for my conduct.
I misspoke. I stand corrected.
And I wanted to apologize to the Asian community, the Asian American community.
Time's up, mother effers.
Yeah, what up, mother effers? It is a great thrill to have you in the mix wherever you're joining us, from wherever you're joining us. Thank you for being here. I want to welcome this guy in. He is one of my favorite people, both personally and I would say from the standpoint of talent. I think he is almost without peer, maybe completely without peer, like no one else can live up to the versatility, the magical quality that this guy has.
There's never been anything like this.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying. He's Robert Thompson, everyone, the voice of so many of your favorite shows.
Hey-o.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. Mark Thompson coming at you right here on YouTube and all kinds of streaming platforms.
Yeah.
Mark T. How are you, Mark T?
It's Thompson and Thompson.
Thompson and Thompson in the morning, in the mid-afternoon, almost afternoon. Thompson.
Robert Thompson, you're the voice of us on so many shows, of so many shows. I'm thinking of the Kelly Clarkson show.
Sure.
Is that show still up and running with the writer's strike or not?
Yeah, it's all over. No, that hasn't. We haven't done any shows since. And they moved to New York, as a matter of fact. So,
do they deal you out?
I don't even know if I'm on the show, to be honest. We'll find out in the fall.
This is exactly. Are you for real, right? Because this is what happened to me with Idol. Yeah. Idol moved to ABC. Okay, right. I did 15 seasons as the voice of American Idol. Just the voice at the beginning, And when they moved to people said, "Are you going to still be doing it?" I don't know. They don't tell me. Like that wasn't their top line item to contact the VO guy.
I have. Where's the? Hey, make sure you let our Morgan Freeman guy know. Who?
You did the show as Morgan Freeman, and it was brilliant. And you improv a lot of stuff. It was really a lot of fun.
I did. We had a good time, Mark. We had a real good time. Oh, yeah.
You started that Morgan Freeman. Did you start the Morgan Freeman on the Late Late Show? Or the whatever it was called? Yeah, the Craig Ferguson deal?
Yeah, because Morgan was a guest on the show, and I said it was a huge deal, by the way, because it was like, well, let's see how it goes. Morgan's going to be a guest. Maybe don't do the impression right away. He's probably not going to like it. It's always this way, by the way. It was always like that on the show. Don't look directly in Craig's eyes. He's never going to go for a robot skeleton that talks, or don't do your different. But all of it, of course, worked out just fine. So, yeah, I decided to talk to Morgan Freeman as Morgan Freeman, and he was like, oh, damn, that guy sounds like me. And the rest is history, as they say.
And you really have doubled his voice in commercials, in movies. I mean, it's wild.
That's right. That's right. And now I'm getting up there, Mark, so my voice is a little bit different. You can hear maybe the denture flap a little bit in my voice. So, I'm 90 years old or whatever the hell it is. I'm about as old. I'm only a few years older than Harrison Ford. Fun fact.
The thing you're talking about is a real thing. Like was Morgan's voice that you used to do, the younger Morgan Freeman, it does sound different than the Freeman of today.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, your voice changes naturally as you get older. In fact, our 6-month-old cat Teddy is now a teenager, and I think his little cat balls dropped. And yesterday he was like, "Hey, how you doing?" Instead of So that's what happened. So after a while, the voice becomes a little thinner. In Morgan's case, it sounds a little little older, and so sometimes they want to bring back that gravitas, give it that old pomp and circumstance, put a little shine on it. Put a little shine on it.
You started. I mean, again, you started. I don't know. It's one of the high-profile things that you've done along the way before you really. I think the career really expanded. Family Guy, and then I mentioned Kelly Clarkson, all these different projects. You were a participant on the Howard Stern show as Schwarzenegger.
That's right.
Can you just run through that? And then I think there was a development in that as well.
I mean, years ago. This is probably 2002, somewhere around there. I started calling in to the Conway and Steckler show. Tim Conway Jr.
Angeles.
And Doug Steckler, right? Big LA radio show back in the day. And anyway, they got a hold of Gary Baba Booey Delabate over at the Stern show, and I started doing calls on Stern. And I think the biggest one was, we're going to blow up the moon. The moon is total bullshit. We got to get rid of the moon. And I have a 5-part plan to destroy the moon. And then the other one was the big prank to George Takei. Oh my! Oh, and
yeah.
George,
he had Takei on his show, and you called in as Schwarzenegger,
yeah,
right?
George was his announcer. George Takei, of course, Sulu from most famously from the original Star Trek series, and he would be Howard's announcer. And he's an openly gay man, and at that time, Arnold said he would make the gay marriage bill legal if George, I will sign the bill if you give me a reach around. So, that kind of material on the Howard Stern show, is appropriate. So anyway, I have not done the show for 11 years.
As I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you decided to step back from the show because they were asking you to say stuff that was really and even for you, so off color or whatever that you just didn't want to.
I think what it was. I think the show was just changing as every show does, and I think what happened was it just wasn't as improvised as it used to be. The writers there are great. The writers there have to work so quickly during the show. I mean, you talk about improv. There's about 5 or 6 writers that are just spitballing ideas constantly during the show. It's like SNL. Maybe you get on that day, maybe you don't, and then you go back and try again the next day. So I just wasn't, but actually the other thing was I started doing the Late Late Show. The Late Late Show was taking up all of my time. So I just couldn't make it work. But I got a call a couple months ago from the Stern show asking me if I'd be interested in, doing Arnold again. And I'd actually had turned them on to some of my other impressionist friends. I got a friend named Jeff Richards, who's a brilliant impressionist, a lovely guy. He's a genius. I said, yeah, call him. Or Joe Gaudette, who does an amazing Arnold. I said, call Joe. And I don't know. They came back around and said, Howard would really love you to, do it. And so, you got to get up at 3:00 in the morning.
Oh, right.
And you got to sit there for the whole show. So it's about 3:00 in the morning.
Oh my God.
You come out of that booth at about 8 a.m. and you don't know who you are. But here's what happened. And it's a beautiful thing. And this is true. I did the show. I got on as Arnold. Howard and I were talking about the Netflix documentary. You and I talked a little bit about it.
About the Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, he's got a show, right? I've got a show called Fuba, and also I've got a documentary about my life. It's fantastic, about the bodybuilding and all that. And so that was it. So it was just like it fit like a glove. It was like no time had passed. And I swear to you, later that day, I got a text from producer Will Murray, who said, "Hey, you're going to get a call from Howard Stern in a couple minutes." And Howard himself, and this rarely happens. Howard's a great guy. Howard called me just to say how much fun it was and how excited it made him to do that segment, which made me feel amazing. So that's a really nice thing to do,
Yeah,
well,
I mean, I
rejuvenated.
think that, yeah, and that reflects, I think, how big a contribution you're making to his show, So
I always feel like it's going to be terrible. I always feel like it was the worst thing I ever did. I guess that's pretty normal because once I got off the show and went and took a nap for 7 hours, I thought, well, that was terrible. And here I get a phone call from Howard Stern saying how great it was. So, in the moment, you're never really enjoying it. At least for me, you always think like, oh, I could have done this, that, and the other thing.
Sure.
So,
I think that's what, makes you a great performer. My return to Howard Stern show is one thing you wanted to touch on, and we did, and I'm glad we got to it. But you also mentioned that the first autograph signing for Starlight Children's Charity. What?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
I did. Well, I guess it was interesting because it's the first autograph signing I've ever done, which is a shock to many, including myself. It's the first time I've ever done an autograph signing.
You didn't think there'd be demand for the autograph, is what you're saying?
I really didn't. Well, I mean, there hadn't been because, during the dark times, I would call conventions and they'd say, yeah, we don't want any. We don't know who you are. But I thought, well, let's do this for charity. Starlight Children's Foundation is one of my charities that I work with. And it's a great organization that, provides like medical gowns to children that are in the hospital. It's a very scary thing if you're a kid and you're in the hospital. I mean, it's bad enough when you're an adult, you're in the hospital. So they provide all these different services for kids that are very entertaining and help make that process a bit easier for them and more, palatable. So,
and where do they have the signing?
Well, it was virtual. I did it right here where I'm sitting right now. And it was a company called Streamily. And believe me, when they called me and approached me about it, I thought, this sounds like the saddest thing. It sounds like I'm at the end. This is it. I have reached the final stage of my career where I'll be signing things, in my bathroom live on Instagram. But we turned it into a show, and you can watch it. I have multiple camera angles and graphics. I even had an overhead camera pointing down to each print.
This is among your, I think, your superpowers early on in this whole process with cameras, and now everybody's got a camera and a ring light, and everybody's got a podcast.
Right.
But before that, Josh Robert Thompson had all of that with multiple cameras and a switcher that he handled live while he's improvising all kinds of material. I was astounded. It was that's where I really discovered you or tried to connect with you. I knew of you, but tried to connect with you early on. I was just so amazed by that.
Yeah, well, that's cool because that process evolved. And because, I went to school for this and I did public access TV for 10 years, I sort of learned all this stuff. But now it came in handy. It actually, so you can watch the show. It's on my YouTube. Just look up Josh Robert Thompson, the full hour-and-a-half show. It's all my characters, Apostle BG, George Lucas, Morgan Freeman. It's really fun, and it's a taste of like the shows I'll be doing in the future. But
and it's a taste. Honestly, it sounds like it's a throwback to some of those characters to some of the shows you did in the past as well.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, the prints, we sold so many prints. It did so well. A lot of love for Apostle BG and George Lucas. I was really surprised at the number of people. Obviously, Jeff Peterson was a big hit, but boy, it really made me feel good.
And for those new to the party, Jeff Peterson was the robot, of course, on that Craig Ferguson Late Late Show. But Apostle BG is this, is a televangelist with the Bible and, like, as I recall, a cigarette in his hand.
That's right, man. That's right, Mark. Yes. Don't act like you don't know, Mark. Don't act like you haven't been to my church. Don't act like every Sunday you don't come to the potluck with your weird vegan fish sticks. Tastes like we know what it is. I go, wait, this ain't orange roughy. This is just rough, is what this is, and I don't care for it. So
what is
get out?
What is you're a huge film fan.
Yeah.
You seen anything so far that you like or that you're disappointed with?
What's going on out there? What's happening out there? What are they doing to Harrison Ford? What's the matter with you people?
Did you like that?
I mean, let me tell you. Let me tell you something. You've been kicking around. You've been punching George Lucas in the face for years. Now he gets all the respect because what happened? The new Star Wars movies came out. Everybody went, oh, I guess Uncle George is okay. I guess Uncle George is okay. Well, there's another property that I helped make, and that's Indiana Jones. And when Crystal Skull came out in 2008, everybody, oh, it was terrible. Well, now everybody says, well, Crystal Skull wasn't too bad, because Daddy Spielberg, Spielberg's not at the helm. It's fine. There's nothing worse than a fine Indiana Jones movie.
That's what our guy said. Our critic who's on this show said it's fine. Exactly. I mean,
it shouldn't be fine. It should have even Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which I love because it's rooted in the 1950s Cold War sci-fi. I mean, if you get that going in, it's a blast. It's pure Indiana Jones, pure Saturday matinee 1940s serial fun. It has two of the greatest set pieces in that movie. I mean, it's just Temple of Doom. I just rewatched Temple of Doom, and as inappropriate as that movie is, again, it is a throwback to the 1930s.
Sure.
It is really good. And it's really scary. Well, we thought it would be fun to have kids, being enslaved and working in mines. We thought that'd be fun. Really? You thought that'd be fun? Yeah, it's a laugh riot at the movies.
So you do that George Lucas. I was telling everybody the George Lucas voice, and you'll dress up as George Lucas with like full-on makeup.
Yeah, sure I will. Well, the other character that I do is Steven Spielberg. And, Mark, I got to tell you, it's wonderful. You got to put your hands like this when you do Steven Spielberg. Well, it's great. I didn't want to direct this film. I told James Mangold, he should direct this film. He's a wonderful director. I said, listen, after we screen the movie, he always says things like this. He's very presentational. He said, after we screen the movie over at the studio, and I turned to everybody and I said, I thought I was the only one that could make these pictures. It turns out I'm not. So it's fantastic. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Well, you're also a producer of the film. No, it's wonderful. It's great. It's probably the best one that's ever been made. Okay. Well,
not exactly objective. That's a very good point.
By the way, another great film that I loved that's getting mixed reviews, the new Insidious film in the Insidious horror film series. It's called Insidious: The Red Door. And it's directed by the lead actor. I can't remember the guy's name. Patrick something. He's great. Patrick's great. He's wonderful. Yeah. I love Patrick. He directed the film, and it is a very emotional, very small. It's a very small film that really is just about family. What I like about it is it's not all of the same horror business from the original films. Mm-hmm. And it really ties up the series, I think, beautifully and poetically. And I shed a little tear at the end. I don't cry at horror movies, but I got pretty choked up at this one.
Patrick Wilson. Yeah.
Patrick Wilson, his first his directorial debut. He did a fantastic job, and I think and good on them. They made they beat Indiana Jones at the box office. They toppled us at the box office. Unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Bunch of crap. It's a bunch of crap.
Did you're on a Stephen King podcast?
Oh, there's a podcast, Fangoria, the big horror magazine, which has been around for years. Fangoria is the reason I got into horror, because when I was really young, I was probably 5 or 6 years old. I was at a grocery store with my grandmother, and I remember reaching at the newsstand inside the grocery store. I remember trying to grab a copy of what was Fangoria magazine. And the cover was a movie called Ghost Story. If you remember this early 80s film, Fred Astaire was in it and a number of other actors. It's old guys sitting around sharing ghost stories. It has this horrifying picture on the front of a woman. Half her face is gone, and it's like a bloody skeleton. And at 6 years old, I just had to see it. And I remember my grandmother took the magazine away from me, and she said, yucky. She said, that's yucky. So thanks, Grandma, because you told me it was yucky. My whole room now is filled with disgusting horror movies. But
that's the way it works, right? Yeah,
absolutely. And they have a podcast called The King Cast, which is all things Stephen King. And I got on the radar of these hosts, and they would have me on now and again as Morgan Freeman, kind of the Matt Damon bit from the Jimmy Kimmel Show, where Morgan Freeman was built up as the guest, and then they always ran out of time. So at the end of the show, you'd hear me go, I can't believe you, son of a bitch. And
that's actually clever.
Yeah. And so then one day they go, hey, maybe we'll have you on as a guest. And so I went on as myself, and the book that we talked about was The Stand, just a tiny book, just a 5,000 page book. But it's one of my favorite current interviews, long form interviews that I've done. And I think if you're a Stephen King fan, you'll get a kick out of it. What I liked about it was that I could be myself and actually talk about films and horror movies.
And you know so much about that. Let me ask you quickly. The Stand is the one where it's about a lab leak or something, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about a government created strain of superflu. Sound familiar? Anybody?
Exactly. I mean, it's truly made for the pandemic. Right.
It's a terrifying book, and it also connects to the Stephen King's Dark Tower series, because there is an evil character in The Stand that will later appear as the villain in the Dark Tower book. So Stephen King has kind of created this amazing universe of characters and stories that all live in the same world. But great interview, and I was so honored to be a part of that. I thought,
and so that's on Fangoria. That's the podcast.
Yeah, you can find it. It's called the King Cast, and you can find it on the Fangoria Podcast Network.
Wow. I had a question related to The Stand. Did they do a movie about it or not?
They've done several movies. Yeah, sure.
How did those movies do? Did the movie?
Well, the one in the 90s was the big one. That was the big, an ABC, miniseries event, The Stand. Right? That was like a huge deal. When I was coming out of high school, oh man, it was like, tune in tonight for the shocking finale of The Stand. And then they recently redid it for, I don't know, Paramount Plus or something.
So what? But okay, so I guess what I'm asking you, is there a decent movie version of the book or not?
I would say that the 90s version,
the original, the ABC version.
That's director Mick Garris, who I think he has a show called Post Mortem. Is that right? It's a horror podcast. Mick Garris has directed a great number of Stephen King adaptations have been directed by the great Mick Garris. And he did one of my favorite movies called Critters 2, one of the great horror films about killer porcupines from outer space. And anyway, Mick's a lovely guy, and that's a great, that's the newsstand. Oh no, that's the old one. Yeah, Molly Ringwald and Gary Sinise.
Wow.
Hey, I'm in this movie. Hey, hey, Mark, it's Gary Sinise. Hey, that's what he does in the whole film.
I love talking to you. Love that things are going so well. You're the real thing, JRT.
I'm still working. We're still here until the strike happens tomorrow.
I'll tell you the truth. I'm bummed out that I didn't think of that Morgan Freeman, like bumping Morgan Freeman every day on this show. That would have been so. You wouldn't have had to be here. You could have just done the drop. We could have played the drops. And
listen, we could just look. Just let this blow over. No one's listening right now to this interview. So let's just do it.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
All right. We'll do it in the future. Leave me with some Arnold on the way out.
Fantastic. I love it. Yeah. Let me tell you something. First of all, let me tell you, Mark, you're vegan. Oh, I wanted to get your vegan bodybuilding tips because I'm trying to.
By the way, I'm trying to work out now. I'm trying to gain lean muscle mass. I'm 48. My God, you read these articles about working out over 40. I mean, I know they're trying to sell their product, but boy, they really amp up. They're like, well, you're basically dead. I mean, what? Right. What is this?
Your chi goes down. Your vitamin
D.
D.
This to me all the time. I don't know what the hell they do it for.
Exactly.
What? So what do I do, Mark? Do I have? Because I can't eat 5 live chickens and broccoli all day. I can eat the broccoli.
Yeah,
lentils.
Well, there's plenty.
What are you
there's
doing
plenty. There's plenty of protein. You don't need any from an animal. Of course not. Yeah, you can get. You've got. I mean, there any number of things. And plus, by the way, if you don't want to eat something, if you just want to jump on the banana and protein shake, there's all kinds of vegan protein shakes.
Right. All right.
But
we'll talk after the show. I don't want to put people to sleep. I want to get you hot tips. I want to get you hot tips on what I should be doing.
Yeah,
because I'm all flabby.
JRT. Do you still have JRT Voices? Is that the website?
The website now. So it's no longer the JRT Show, ladies and gentlemen. I am happy to announce, after 10 years of negotiating, I am now. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, the guy who held you up for more and more.
He had it at like $3,000. Ladies and gentlemen, for a reasonable price, Josh Robert Thompson has acquired JRTshow.com.
Wow, that's really exciting.
I've done it.
JRTshow.com.
Yeah, as soon as I bought it, I regretted it. Anyway.
There, we got it up on screen now, JRTshow.com.
Yeah, boy, does that need to be updated. Don't mind the font. It's from 10 years ago. We're gonna have a whole new website.
Look, you dance with the date that brung you, man. I like it. It works out.
Follow me on Threads. Don't follow me. Get out of here.
All right, Josh, come be a regular, will you? We love you. Thank you,
I love you, buddy.
Talk to you soon. Josh Robert Thompson. Right on.
We have processes and protocols and standards.
We do, and he is he honors all of them. The great Josh Robert Thompson.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Oh, well, we must wrap up. I hate to wrap up. I don't like wrapping up.
It's that time already, huh?
Yeah. I mean,
12:03. We're late. We're 4 minutes behind schedule.
Wow.
But Josh Robert Thompson was so fun. I can see why we went over.
Yeah. We liked it. We liked it.
I want to have
controversy on the show, as you know.
Yeah.
About the closing music.
Oh, did we decide old or new?
Well, it's a dead heat. It's a dead heat.
What?
This is the old music is that. Right. But the new music is more upbeat. So I don't know. I kind of think the new music has a little something to it. What do you think, Kim?
I'm used to the old. I have to get used to the new. It'll take me a hot minute, I think.
Albert, what do you think?
I like the new one. The old music just felt like the grand ending. This one feels like we're looking forward to tomorrow.
I agree, Albert. Thank you. I agree with that. Thank you, everybody who. I thank everybody who supported us with super stickers, super chats.
I'm Shadow Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
You can find us at themarkthompsonshow.com. Patreon and PayPal's a way to support us. Tomorrow,
Bye-bye.
the whole crew is here. You know Thursdays are big on this show. Till then.